I think it goes without saying you hardly have a high-rise building if you don't have a functioning elevator system. Elevators can obviously be a hot button topic because nothing will drive a footpath to the manager's door faster than an elevator that isn't in service. I'm hoping you can speak with us a little bit about maintenance control programs and how we can ensure reliability of our elevators in a high-rise setting specifically.
Okay, Catherine. Well, no question when it comes to an elevator system, it's the heart of a building. Without an elevator, we wouldn't have the skyline that we have, and we wouldn't be mobile. People can't get to work, can't get to play, and can't get to their place where they live without an elevator system. In terms of the maintenance control program, I think what's important is that really we have a really joint effort between the property manager, the owner, and the elevator company, and making sure that you're designing a maintenance program that not only is compliant with regulation and legislation, but works for your building. It's one thing to be compliant, but it's another thing to make sure that you have a program that works for your building. There's different demands in different buildings. Sometimes it's hard to secure an elevator to do service. So I think it's really important to have an open line of communication with your elevator contractor to make sure you have the right program in place.
And I think you've hit upon a key element is ensuring that you're getting the maintenance tasks done on a routine basis and communicating to your homeowners that an elevator that is pulled for service is not a broken elevator. It's one that is having routine checks done.
Yeah, I fully agree. The perception is when an elevator's undergoing maintenance, everyone just sort of assumes it's broken again. And that's why I think it's important in some buildings to make sure you have the right maintenance program for that building. Some buildings have few elevators, so it's a question of designing a program that sometimes helps to eliminate that perception, where maybe you do it off hours, you understand the building flow traffic, or maybe it's an after hours service program. So again, I think each building has unique requirements.
What advice might you give managers and or residents in providing enough detail to help your technicians diagnose an issue or a problem?
Catherine, I think that's a great question because it's really important in terms of troubleshooting and resolving elevator issues that we get as much information as possible. Residents, property managers, they can get a feel for what's going on in the building, or they might be able to recognize events that take place during certain periods of time. So the more information they can provide us when they're calling in for service, the easier it will be, and it will facilitate the mechanic in trying to resolve the problem quicker.
Mike, I want to talk to you a little bit about when things go off the rails a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about the audit process that you would go through when you're kind of commissioned or engaged as a consultant?
So there's a couple sides of an audit from the consulting side of it. There's one where you come in and you do an overall audit on how the equipment's running, what type of equipment it is, and we write this report and take pretty pictures and we send it all off. In today's equipment, all the information that the contractors need are in that controller, and the minute you turn the power off and turn the power back on, you've eliminated that. So the more we can help the contractor narrow down what the issues are, that's the first thing. Then from there, we got to put a plan together with the contractors to say, okay, what is the repair? When's it going to be done? That's where we get more involved. You know, the audit part of it is we understand that happens more for maybe the new turnover that we need to do for the carry-on or the performance audits, and they're great. But when you're running a building that's been running for a while, 5, 10 years, 30 years, it's more about brokering and maybe perhaps looking at what we should be doing as far as moving forward and putting capital plans together and things like that to say, hey, you are 30 years, you've got the original door equipment, maybe we look at upgrading that at least to bring up a little better standard. We're able to come in and give an objective opinion to the board. Whoever's, you know, there's two parts to every side. So we can come in and say, hey, Mr. Elevator Company, you didn't do this, or hey, Mr. Elevator Company or Mrs. Elevator Company has been taking care of this, and really we need to go this route if you want reliability, sort of speak. So we come in and give everybody the good, the bad, and the ugly and say, this is where we need to be, or this is where you're at, and then we go from there.
It sounds also, Mike, that you're really instrumental in getting the kind of data that your technician, Gary, would need to diagnose a problem. Newer elevator systems do have and do track errors in their software system. And some of our site staff, unbeknownst to them, are creating a bigger issue or problem in trying to get an elevator back up and running by resetting it. So if you can talk a little bit about the information that may be lost if that is what is done by somebody on site.
The MCP is simple, but it's complicated. You know, elevator people understand what it is because that's what we're trained to do. So we don't really like non-elevator people going into the room. So for reasons that it's moving equipment, we don't want anybody getting hurt, we don't want anybody touching and playing with equipment that has 600 volts of electricity up there for most part. So it's important that people leave it to the experts. It's why they have a license in their pocket, like Gary and I do, and his team does, and our team does. It's important for that, and if you want it resolved correctly, it's important that they can go in and see that. Go in and see what the problems are. If it happens once, twice, third time it shouldn't happen because it should have been rectified. That's what's important about not shutting those elevators down, as well as the safety component.
So the next topic I'd like to touch upon again briefly is when we are coming to the end of the useful life of an elevator and we're starting to look at a major repair or replacement, a modernization, and what your role or involvement would be as an elevator consultant in helping a board and a community plan for that repair.
Our involvement would be to write the full specification for the modernization, being not only what type of equipment, but also to assure that you may need the fireman's retrofit done because of the new codes. You probably will need the HVAC upgraded because of the, what needs to be done with the air conditioning. Electrical may be. So our involvement would be to write the full spec, then pick the companies, invite them to come and bid on the specification that needs to be done for the building. And every building has a different mandate. Some of them you're dealing with that might say, we want the Cadillac, and the other ones are buildings are saying, listen, we just want the nice, reliable Buick, and away we go. And then we would award the job to a contractor, and then follow right through to when, after TSSA has inspected it, then we would go in also and do more of a performance audit, because TSSA does the safety side of it. We would do the safety as well, but we do the performance audit on it, make sure that everything is good, and then we would give a report to the owner. During that whole process, we would be showing up with the contractor for most part every couple weeks, just to make sure the progress is going on, keep everybody informed. And then at the end, we would write a report to say, hey, this is good. Same thing, kind of like the carry-on new construction, where we have to say, yeah, we think that 95% of the deficiencies are done. We got a couple little ones, whatever. So that's the way the modernization would work.
You've touched upon something that I think a lot of board members, residents in particular, don't necessarily understand, and that's a difference between perhaps safety issues in an elevator and what are broadly termed as ride quality issues. And I'm hoping you can maybe address that.
So sometimes we go in and they say, well, this ride quality is a problem, and then we have to tell them, well, you either spec'd out or you bought equipment that doesn't ride quite as smooth, opposed to a roller guide and a slipper. There's two different ways that the elevator rides up and down on this. So you're going to hear some noise, sometimes you're not. Unfortunately too, in today's, in our elevator world, the elevators are made out of lighter products and whatever, so we do get some noise. The biggest thing that we deal with right now is definitely noise issues. We get a lot of that. Some of it can be rectified. Some of it is, unfortunately, is the type of equipment that was spec'd out and built.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say on the safety aspect is what Mike touched on, is from a reliability perspective, it's the safest mode of safest mode of transportation. When you look at the number of elevators running out there and the frequency of incidents, it's one of the safest modes of transportation in terms of statistics. The other thing from a safety aspect, I would say, unfortunately, there's a lot of user error that sometimes leads to an incident, such as trying to reach into a door that's closing. And you don't get far enough with your hand to cross that infrared detector, which is on the car door side, and all of a sudden you get your hand smacked. And then from a reliability perspective, again, I think there's a lot of things that elevator contractors are working on to drive reliability. But again, that communication and feedback from the site is critical in terms of resolving problems quickly.
And that would be symptomology, direction the elevator was running when
Yeah.
the issue happened.
What floor did
button.
you hear the noise at when you were going by? Is the elevator shaking when it goes by a specific floor? Any type of symptom that you can communicate helps to pinpoint, even if it happens during a certain time of the day. You know, it's every morning this happens. You know, any information like that will be helpful.
And I think that also helps to focus your mechanic's attention to a specific floor where he can look a lot more closely than simply all of the routine checks that would be done. Just before we leave, and I want to thank you again for joining me, I'm asking everybody who participates with me to think of one thing that they would tell managers about their specific area of expertise that would help them in being successful.
I think from a property management perspective, there's things that you can do before you call is one thing that I would want to highlight. And this is not for the sake of trying to save cost for the elevator contractor, but it's about minimizing the inconvenience to residents, because there's times when an elevator mechanic will respond and it's a very easy fix. So I would suggest for a property manager, and some of these things are very common knowledge, but again, just to reinforce, before you call, make sure you personally visit the elevator and verify that all key switches are in the normal or run position. We get a lot of calls for service where the elevator's on independent service, mechanic gets there, turns a key switch. Verify that the fireman service isn't on. So we've had calls like that where fireman service is on. I would make sure that property managers are daily checking car sills and hall sills. So as part of a daily schedule, verify that your sills are clean from obstructions, because again, that will hold doors open. I think wiping down door detectors on elevator doors is another thing that can cause elevator doors from closing. So I think if property managers can, through their staff, verify elevators and their status before call for service, it may be the difference between a 10-minute, like returning an elevator to service after 10 minutes versus returning it to service after 2 hours.
Mine is very, very simple, actually. There's always confusion that the managers will say, I didn't see anybody from your team this month or in the last 4 months or 3 months or whatever it is. You want to make your life a little simpler as a manager to know whether people are coming in out of your building. Have your elevator contractor sign in and out. That'll make your life a lot simpler. Then you'll be able to know, and the communication will be better between you and your contractor.
I think my comments would go towards the contractual obligation between the client and the provider of maintenance. I think it's expected from the provider, since they have a comprehensive contract for maintenance, that everything would be covered by monthly cost per cap. And I think the confusion is, and the problem arises when some of the costs shown as not covered by the contract. And this is, again, a gray area where we have to deal with the contractor, with the board, residents, of course, because they see and they look at the budget at the end of the year. And there will be repeated questions on why we have to pay over and above. So this is where we're struggling. So I guess that communicating better with us and using us to communicate with the board and owners, I guess it's a key at this stage in the game.
Yeah, like I agree with Michael fully that communication is really at the heart of any partnership. And with your service contractor, with your consultant, you've got to have strong communication. All parties need to be engaged. All stakeholders have to be communicating and be on the same page. If that relationship is strong and respectful on both sides, I think elevator contractors can deliver better, and of course property managers can deliver to the residents much better. But I agree with you fully, the heart of it is communication. It can always be better.
Knowing what to expect
Yeah.
means that folks can manage and deal with just about any
Absolutely.
circumstance, right? And it's the unexpected and the unknown which creates a lot of the anxiety. I think I'm right in noting that if there is somebody who is entrapped in an elevator, the majority of the time firefighters will not use the jaws of life and open the elevator like a can opener to extract people. They will monitor the situation, and they will wait for a trained elevator technician to safely open the doors and extract the person.
Yeah, that's sort of a last resort for them if there was a significant medical emergency. But again, it's, with an elevator contractor, you can confirm that the elevator is at the floor and work from there with the fire department to make sure the rescue is done safely. But the safest place to be is to be in the elevator and allow it's stopped, it's not going anywhere, it's not going to move anywhere, and let the elevator contractor get you removed from the elevator.
Great. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate your taking the time to meet with me
Thank
today.
you. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me, Roger. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Elevators are and can be a big headache for property managers. When we were talking before we sat down here today, I was telling you there's nothing worse than finding out that there's an elevator that's not working on Friday afternoon. So I'm hoping you can give all of the managers out there a little bit more faith that we hold the key to making sure that we can get reliable elevator service.
I think you definitely do. I think that property managers often feel they don't have that control, but I think they actually have the most control, and more than they think. I think the key thing for property managers is to get involved, and don't assume that by simply hiring an elevator contractor that everything's going to go well. Make sure you have a contract in place. Make sure you understand what's in the contract. One of the key components of that is the MCP, which there's been a lot of discussion with property managers recently. I'm sure you've seen this about the maintenance control program, and it's important that the property manager understands what is the MCP for their building, because it's going to be different on every single building and every single elevator that they have in their portfolio, and it should be. If an elevator company is telling you, oh, they're all the same, then they're not applying it correctly. When the code was originally developed, it was developed with the intent that every elevator is unique and needs its own level of attention. So the property manager should be working with their elevator contractor to establish what's the frequency of maintenance that we're going to have on this device, what does it need in order to keep it safe.
Could you almost drive down to an MCP being almost a checklist, a listing of items that are
That's exactly
to
what
be
it
done?
is, yeah. It is actually a checklist, and I would encourage property managers to go up and look at it in the machine room or have it kept in their office. It just has to be kept somewhere where the elevator company can get access to it, and also the elevator inspectors. But an MCP is simply a checklist of what's going to be done at what frequency, and some of those frequencies are prescribed by the code. There's certain things that have to be done every year and every 5 years, but there's also like the regular maintenance, and that can be done from as often as, heck, you could do it every day if you wanted to, but no more than 3 months. What we have said is you will come no more or less frequently than every 3 months. We want to see you at least here 4 times a year, because that's what it's going to take to ensure the safety of this device. There will be a logbook in your machine room that is just a checklist. Sometimes it's not always clear. There could be things on that checklist that the elevator company has failed to cross off. Something doesn't apply to your particular device. Encourage them, say, cross off the things that don't apply to my elevator, and then tell me for the rest of these tasks exactly when you're coming. And then hold the company accountable for doing that. Sometimes,
of course, your inspections will result in orders that are sent to the owner, and most often it's the property manager who will be the direct recipient on behalf of the owners. Talk to me a little bit about your voluntary compliance means of dispensing with a second inspection.
So if when we find orders, every order we write is hazard ranked. And if it's a high hazard ranked type order, we would say, okay, no, we're going to have to come back and we're going to follow this up because it's a pretty serious item. But for a lot of the orders, and especially a lot of the things that you'll find within the MCP, we'll say, look, this is just something that needs to get done. We're going to give you voluntary compliance. We really do not want to come back. We've got enough other work. We don't need to be coming back and re-inspecting the exact same thing we just looked at. And so we'll ask you, please ensure these things get resolved, and then just send it back to us and confirm in writing, yes, these are all resolved. We won't come back and inspect again. That's the declaration of compliance. But for the most part, we just take you at your word and say thank you, and we move on to something else. You save money, we get the compliance.
Required reporting if there is ever an injury in an elevator or involving an elevator. That's again something that in all likelihood would be done by the property manager and in connection or conjunction with their elevator contractor.
Yes. So whenever there's an incident, you have a duty as an owner and as the contractor to report it to us. People do things when they're on elevators that they, they're not intending to go out and hurt themselves, but they may choose to stick their hand between the doors at the last second to reopen the doors. Pay attention. We have a lot of people being distracted and being hit by doors. We have a lot of children who can often get hurt on elevators. And when they do happen, you can certainly contact us at our 800 number. There's forms you can fill out. If someone's been seriously injured, there's protocols to follow in terms of you can't, or depending on the type of the nature of the incident, you can't return the device to service at first until you contact us. We may have to come in and do an investigation to determine what was the root cause of what happened, and then say, okay, we figured it out, you go ahead and have your elevator back again.
The other thing, of course, that is a hot topic of conversation is the private members bill.
The government realized with that private members bill that there's definitely an issue out there. They're hearing it from a lot of different people, and there's a lot of different stakeholders with differing ideas, different opinions on what is affecting elevator availability and reliability. Because I mean, you can have a perfectly reliable elevator that maybe at a particular moment isn't available for differing reasons, and it's well outside the scope of simply just TSSA. TSSA looks after just the safety of the elevator, but there can be things affecting the elevator and its availability that had nothing to do with us. It could be the original design of the building. Maybe there wasn't enough elevators put into it in the first place, the age of it. There's a lot of competing factors that go into this. So what the government has said, they need to get a better understanding of exactly what are all the issues? What are the driving factors? What are the root causes for availability issues? What's the definition of availability? I don't think there's even a universal determination of how should we define that. So what they asked us to do, given that we know most of the players in the industry, is to facilitate a study over between now and October, where we'll hire a firm that will go out and they'll do interviews and town halls, focus groups with all the various players who touch elevators. So it'll be organizations like yourself, other owners associations, contractors, architects, fire marshal's office, ambulance attendants. There's a whole lot of people that have a stake in this. Gather all the information and then use that to sort of make a fact-based presentation back of what are the root causes, what are some possible policy decisions that the government could take to change in the future.
If there was one thing you could tell property managers that you could remind them that would help them be successful in this case in having good quality elevators, reliable elevators, what would it be?
I think again, just get involved right from the very start. Make sure you understand what's required for your elevator maintenance, what are the frequencies, and just make sure that happens and hold whoever you're working with accountable to make sure that happens.
It's been a great pleasure. Thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
joining me, Roger.
Appreciate it. Thanks.